the fog-choked shadows of 1920s London, Lady Beatrice Ashford, heiress to a diamond empire, vanishes from her locked Regent Street townhouse, leaving only a pearl earring and a cryptic clue, the word Regent burned in ashes. Hercule Poirot, with his unmatched intellect, unravels a web of secrets, hidden passages, anonymous threats, and a sinister plot driven by greed. From the opulent drawing rooms to a grim Thameside warehouse, every clue points to betrayal. Can Poirot's little gray cells outwit a cunning mastermind before the heiress is lost forever? The clock is ticking in this thrilling tale of deception and danger. Chapter 1. The Disappearance. The November fog draped Regent Street in a ghostly shroud, muffling the clatter of hansoms and the cries of newsboys. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the damp, navigated the crowded pavement with the precision of a metronome, his silver-headed cane tapping a staccato rhythm. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, struggled to match his friend's brisk pace, his overcoat flapping in the chill wind. "Really, Poirot," Hastings huffed, adjusting his scarf. "You might slow down. This isn't a race to the Derby." Poirot's green eyes glinted with amusement beneath the brim of his immaculate Homburg. "Mon cher Hastings, when a lady of consequence vanishes, time is not our friend. Lady Beatrice Ashford is no ordinary woman. Her wealth, her beauty, her position. Non, we must hasten." The summons had arrived at Poirot's Whitehaven Mansions flat that morning, borne by a footman whose pallor betrayed his agitation. The note, penned in a hurried hand, was from Mrs. Margaret Crane, housekeeper to Lady Beatrice, imploring Poirot's aid. The heiress, sole inheritor of the Ashford diamond empire, had disappeared from her Regent Street townhouse without a trace. No ransom note, no witnesses, only a single pearl earring left behind. As they approached the grand Georgian facade of the Ashford residence, its windows stared blankly into the fog like the eyes of a sleeper. The door swung open before Poirot could raise the knocker, revealing Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, his weathered face etched with worry. "Poirot, you're a sight for sore eyes," Japp said, ushering them into the marble-floored hall. "This is a queer business. Lady Beatrice dined alone last night, seen by her maid at 9 o'clock. Come morning, her bed's untouched, and this was found." He produced a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a single pearl earring, its luster catching the light of the chandelier. Poirot took the earring, turning it delicately in his gloved fingers. "Très intéressant," he murmured. "A pearl of such quality is not left behind carelessly. Where was it found, mon ami?" "By the drawing-room window," Japp replied. "But here's the rub. The window was locked, no signs of tampering. The front and back doors, too. It's as if she vanished into thin air." Hastings, warming his hands by the hall's fireplace, ventured an opinion. "Sounds to me like she's run off. Young heiresses do that sort of thing, don't they? Perhaps a secret beau." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sure sign of disagreement. "Non, Hastings. A woman of Lady Beatrice's refinement does not flee her home without her jewels, her clothes, or her maid. The little gray cells, they protest such a theory. No, there is a pattern here, a design we have yet to discern." Japp led them to the drawing-room, a vision of opulence with its gilded mirrors and velvet drapes. The remnants of Lady Beatrice's dinner lay untouched on a rosewood table. A half-eaten plate of sole meunière, a glass of claret barely sipped. A novel, The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, lay open on a chaise longue, its pages marked by a silk ribbon. Poirot's gaze lingered on the hearth, where a faint smudge of ash marred the otherwise pristine marble. "Curieux," he said softly, crouching to inspect the ash. "This fireplace has not been cleaned since last night, and yet this mark, it is fresh. Tell me, Inspector, who was in the house when Lady Beatrice was last seen?" Japp consulted his notebook. "The butler, Grayson, was here until 10, locking up. The maid, Elsie, saw to her mistress at 9. The housekeeper, Mrs. Crane, retired early. And there's the cousin, Julian Ashford, who lives here but was out at his club until midnight." Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the room with the precision of a jeweler appraising a gem. He paused by the window, its heavy sash locked tight, and ran a finger along the sill. A faint scratch, barely visible, caught his attention. "This window," he said, "it tells a story, but not the one it appears to tell." Japp frowned. "What are you on about, Poirot? It's locked, I tell you." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his voice low. "And that, mon ami, is what makes it so very interesting." As they left the drawing-room, Poirot's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The earring, the ash, the locked window, the untouched meal. Lady Beatrice Ashford had not simply vanished. She had been taken, or so the little grey cells whispered. But by whom? And why? The answer, Poirot knew, lay hidden in the shadows of this elegant house, waiting for his methodical genius to bring it to light. Chapter 2. The Household's Secrets. The Ashford residence, despite its grandeur, seemed to Hercule Poirot a stage set for a drama yet to be unveiled. The fog outside had thickened, pressing against the tall windows of the library where Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Japp now stood. The room, with its towering bookshelves and heavy brocade curtains, exuded an air of secrets hoarded like the volumes on its shelves. A fire crackled in the grate, casting flickering shadows across the portrait of the late Lord Ashford, whose stern eyes seemed to watch the proceedings with disapproval. Poirot, his small frame erect and his hands clasped behind his back, surveyed the household members summoned before him. Each, he knew, held a piece of the puzzle surrounding Lady Beatrice Ashford's disappearance. His task was to arrange these pieces with the precision of a watchmaker, for as he often remarked, it is the order and the method that reveal the truth. First to be questioned was Mr. Grayson, the butler, a man whose gaunt face and rigid posture suggested a life spent in service to duty. His black suit was impeccable, his manner as starched as his collar. "I have served the Ashford family for 30 years, he said, his voice low and measured. "Lady Beatrice was in the drawing-room when I locked up at 10 o'clock last night. I saw nothing amiss." Poirot's green eyes, sharp as cut glass, fixed on the butler. "And you, Monsieur Grayson, you observed her mood? Was she perhaps agitated?" Grayson hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "She seemed preoccupied, sir. She asked that no callers be admitted after 8. That was unusual." "Unusual, you say?" Poirot's mustache quivered slightly. "And did you see anyone near the house as you locked up? A stranger, perhaps?" "None, sir," Grayson replied, but his fingers twitched at his side, a gesture Poirot noted with interest. Next came Elsie, the maid, a slip of a girl no older than 20, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She clutched a handkerchief as she stood before Poirot, her apron trembling with her nerves. "I saw her ladyship at 9, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I brought her tea after dinner. She was reading, as she often did. I found the earring this morning by the window when I came to clean." Poirot's tone was gentle, coaxing. "And this earring, mademoiselle, it was alone? No other signs of disturbance?" Elsie shook her head. "No, sir, just the earring. It's one of a pair she wore often, pearls from her mother's collection." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the detail. "And Lady Beatrice, she was alone when you left her?" "Yes, sir," Elsie said, then hesitated. "Though, I thought I heard voices later when I was in the servants' hall, low, like someone was trying not to be heard." "Voices!" Hastings exclaimed, leaning forward. "Why didn't you say so earlier, girl?" Elsie flinched. "I wasn't sure, sir. It was faint, and I didn't want to cause a fuss." Poirot raised a hand, silencing Hastings. "Come, mon ami. Mademoiselle Elsie, you have done well to tell us. These voices, they were male or female?" "I couldn't tell, sir," she admitted. "But they came from the drawing room, I'm certain." The third member of the household was Mr. Julian Ashford, Lady Beatrice's cousin, a man whose boyish charm was marred by a restless energy. He lounged in a leather armchair, a glass of brandy in hand, his dark eyes darting between Poirot and Japp. At 30, he cut a dashing figure in his tailored suit, but there was a hardness to his jaw that spoke of a life lived on the edge of propriety. "Really, this is all quite tiresome," Julian said, swirling his brandy. "Beatrice is a free spirit. She's probably off on some lark, visiting friends in Paris or some such nonsense." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "Monsieur Ashford, you are remarkably unconcerned for your cousin's safety. She is, after all, the heiress to a great fortune, and you, I understand, are her nearest relative." Julian's smile was thin. "If you're implying I've anything to do with this, you're barking up the wrong tree. I've my own income. Thank you very much. Beatrice's money doesn't interest me." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing, "you live in her house, no? You benefit from her generosity?" Julian's cheeks flushed. "She's family. Of course I stay here when I'm in town. Doesn't mean I've kidnapped her." Japp, who had been pacing by the fireplace, interjected. "Where were you last night, Mr. Ashford? You weren't here when the servants locked up." "At my club, the Diogenes," Julian replied smoothly. "Playing cards until midnight. Ask anyone there." Poirot made a mental note to verify this alibi, but his attention shifted to the housekeeper, Mrs. Margaret Crane, who entered the library with a tray of tea, her face a mask of weary competence. A woman in her late 40s, her gray hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her eyes held the quiet wisdom of one who had seen much but said little. "Madame Crane," Poirot began, accepting a cup of tea with a nod. "You have known Lady Beatrice since she was a child. Tell me, was she troubled in recent weeks?" Mrs. Crane set the tray down, her hands steady but her lips tight. "She was not herself, sir. For 3 weeks she'd been receiving letters, unsigned, slipped under the door or left in her post. She burned them in the fireplace, but I saw her read one last week. Her hands shook, and she looked pale as death." Poirot leaned forward, his interest piqued. "These letters, they contained threats?" "I don't know, sir," Mrs. Crane said. "She wouldn't speak of them, but she changed after they began. She stopped attending balls, kept to the house more. And then there was Mr. Vance." "Reginald Vance?" Japp asked, his notebook at the ready. Mrs. Crane nodded. "The financier. He proposed to her a month ago at the Cavendish ball. She refused him outright. I heard them arguing in the garden. His voice was sharp, angry. She told me later she didn't trust him." Poirot's mind raced, arranging these new facts like cards in a game of patience. Vance, a man of wealth but dubious reputation, had been scorned. The anonymous letters had begun shortly after. And now Beatrice was gone, leaving only a pearl earring and a smudge of ash as clues. "Madame Crane," Poirot said, "these letters, did you ever see their contents, even a glimpse?" She shook her head. "No, sir, but one night as I passed the drawing-room, I saw her burn one. A word caught my eye before it turned to ash. Regent. I thought it odd, but it's just the street name, isn't it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps, madame. Or perhaps it is a key to this mystery." As the household dispersed, Poirot stood by the window, gazing into the fog. The little gray cells were at work, sifting through the testimonies, Grayson's unease, Elsie's overheard voices, Julian's nonchalance, and Mrs. Crane's revelation. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot knew that somewhere in this house or beyond it lay the truth of Lady Beatrice's fate. He turned to Hastings and Japp, his voice calm but resolute. "We have much to learn, mes amis. The game, it has only just begun." Chapter 3. The Shadow of Reginald Vance. The fog had not lifted from London's streets as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings stepped out of a hansom cab near Bond Street, the heart of the city's financial pulse. The air was thick with the scent of coal smoke and damp wool, and the clatter of hooves echoed through the mist. Poirot, his overcoat buttoned to the chin and his mustache impeccably groomed, led the way to the offices of Vance and Sons, a sleek building of polished stone that seemed to gleam with the arrogance of new money. "Reginald Vance," Hastings muttered, glancing at the brass plaque on the door. "Sounds like a bounder to me, Poirot. Proposing to Lady Beatrice and then arguing with her in public? Bad form." Poirot's green eyes flickered with a hint of amusement. "Mon cher Hastings, you judge too quickly. A man may propose and be refused without turning to villainy. But this, Vance, he interests me. His name appears twice now, in Mrs. Crane's account of the argument and in the shadow of those anonymous letters. We shall see what manner of man he is." The interior of Vance and Sons was a temple to wealth, all mahogany panels and Persian rugs, with clerks scurrying like acolytes. Reginald Vance awaited them in his private office, a spacious room adorned with hunting trophies, and a portrait of himself in riding gear. He was a tall man, nearing 40, with a lean face and eyes that glinted like polished steel. His smile, as he rose to greet them, was polished too, but it did not reach those eyes. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," Vance said, gesturing to two leather chairs. "I confess I'm surprised to see you. This business with Beatrice, most distressing. How may I assist?" Poirot settled into his chair, his small hands folded neatly over his cane. "Monsieur Vance, you proposed marriage to Lady Beatrice Ashford 1 month ago, and she refused you. This is correct?" Vance's smile tightened. "A private matter, surely. But yes, I offered my hand. She declined, as was her right. I harbor no ill will. Yet," Poirot continued, his voice soft as velvet, "there was an altercation at the Cavendish ball. Voices raised, tempers heated. You were, perhaps, displeased?" Vance leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. A misunderstanding, nothing more. Beatrice was headstrong, charming, but headstrong. I merely pressed my case. She took offense. That was the end of it. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as skepticism. And last night, monsieur, where were you between 9 and midnight? Vance's eyes narrowed, but his tone remained smooth. At my club, the Reform, playing bridge. I left at midnight, as my porter can confirm. Surely you don't suspect me of involvement in this disappearance? Poirot did not answer directly. Instead, he tilted his head, studying Vance as one might a rare specimen. Lady Beatrice, she received anonymous letters in recent weeks. You know nothing of these, I presume? Letters? Vance's brow furrowed, though whether in genuine surprise or practiced innocence, Poirot could not yet determine. No, I know nothing of any letters. If Beatrice was troubled, she didn't confide in me. Hastings, unable to contain himself, leaned forward. Come now, Mr. Vance. A woman refuses you, you argue publicly, and now she's gone. It doesn't look good, does it? Vance's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of anger. I suggest you mind your accusations, Captain. I am a man of means and reputation. If Beatrice has met with foul play, look elsewhere. Perhaps that wastrel cousin of hers, Julian, is it? He's always sniffing about her fortune. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Merci, Monsieur Vance. You have been most forthcoming. We shall not detain you further. As they left the office, the fog seemed to close in around them, mirroring the opacity of the case. Hastings, pulling his coat tighter, grumbled, He's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see how he bristled when I mentioned the argument? Shifty, I tell you. Perhaps, mon ami, Poirot replied, his cane tapping rhythmically as they walked. But suspicion is not proof. Vance's alibi, it must be checked, and his mention of Julian Ashford. There is no love lost between them, it seems. We must tread carefully, for the truth lies in the details. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot sat in his armchair, a cup of tisane steaming beside him. He had dispatched Japp to verify Vance's alibi at the Reform Club, but his own thoughts were elsewhere, circling the fragments of the mystery. The pearl earring, the smudge of ash, the word Regent glimpsed by Mrs. Crane. And now, Vance's cool demeanor and quick deflection to Julian. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with activity. Hastings, he said suddenly, consider this. A man like Vance, he is accustomed to power, to control. A refusal from a woman such as Lady Beatrice, it wounds not only his heart, but his pride. And pride, mon ami, can be a dangerous thing. Hastings nodded, though his expression remained dubious. But if he's involved, how did he manage it? The house was locked, no signs of a break-in, and Elsie heard voices. Could Vance have been there? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément, Hastings. The voices are a key, but we must ask ourselves, were they truly in the drawing room, or did they come from elsewhere? The house, it holds secrets yet to be uncovered. That evening, Poirot made a discreet call to a contact at the Reform Club, confirming that Vance had indeed been there until midnight, as claimed. Yet something in the man's manner, the too perfect alibi, the calculated charm, gnawed at Poirot. He resolved to return to the Ashford residence at dawn, for there was one detail he had overlooked, the fireplace, and that curious smudge of ash. It was, he suspected, more than a careless mark. It was a whisper of the truth, waiting to be heard. As the gas lamps flickered outside, casting long shadows across Poirot's study, he leaned back, his fingers steepled. The shadow of Reginald Vance loomed large, but whether as villain or distraction, only the methodical unraveling of the mystery would reveal. For now, Poirot knew one thing. The game was afoot, and he would not rest until Lady Beatrice Ashford was found. Chapter 4. The Clue in the Ashes. The morning sun pierced the fog over Regent Street, casting a pale light through the tall windows of the Ashford residence. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his dove-gray suit, stood once more in the drawing-room where Lady Beatrice Ashford had last been seen. His small, precise steps echoed softly on the polished floor as he moved toward the fireplace, his green eyes fixed on the faint smudge of ash that had caught his attention the previous day. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, watched with a mixture of curiosity and impatience, while Inspector Japp, summoned from Scotland Yard, hovered near the door, his notebook at the ready. "Really, Poirot," Hastings said, stifling a yawn. "It's just a bit of ash. The maid probably missed it when cleaning. Can't we focus on Vance or that cousin Julian? They're far more likely suspects." Poirot's mustache twitched with a hint of reproach. "Mon cher Hastings, you underestimate the importance of the small things. The ash, it is not mere dirt. It is a message, a footprint in the sand of this mystery. We must read it carefully." Kneeling with surprising agility for a man of his fastidious nature, Poirot produced a small magnifying glass from his pocket and examined the hearth. The smudge was irregular, not the scattered residue of a fire, but a deliberate mark, as though something had been pressed into the ashes. With a gloved hand, he sifted through the grate, his fingers moving with the delicacy of a surgeon. After a moment, he extracted a tiny, charred fragment of paper no larger than a postage stamp. Holding it to the light, he discerned a single word, scrawled in a hurried hand: Regent. "Voila!" Poirot exclaimed, his voice tinged with triumph. The word Madame Crane glimpsed in the burned letter. It was not a coincidence, mes amis. This is a clue, deliberately left or carelessly overlooked. Japp, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. "Regent? That's just the name of the street, Poirot. Could be nothing more than a scrap from a bill or a note." "Non, Inspector," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "In a house where every detail is meticulously ordered, a scrap of paper in the ashes is no accident. This word, it points to something specific. A place, a person, a plan. We must discover its meaning." Rising, Poirot turned his attention to the window where the pearl earring had been found. The heavy sash was still locked, its brass fittings gleaming in the morning light. He ran a finger along the sill, pausing at the faint scratch he had noted before. Leaning closer, he examined it through his magnifying glass, noting its shallow, precise nature. "This scratch," he murmured, "it is recent, made with a fine tool, perhaps a knife. Yet the window remains locked. Curious, no?" Hastings scratched his head. "But if the window wasn't opened, how could anyone have taken her? You're not suggesting she vanished through the walls, are you?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Not through the walls, Hastings, but perhaps through a means we have not yet considered. The house, it has secrets. We must look beyond the obvious." Japp, growing impatient, gestured toward the door. "I've got men checking Vance's alibi and Julian's club records. What's next, Poirot? We can't keep poking around fireplaces all day." Poirot nodded, pocketing the charred fragment. We return to Mademoiselle Elsie. Her testimony of the voices. It troubles me. She heard something, yet she is uncertain. We must coax the truth from her memory. They found Elsie in the servants' hall, polishing silver with a nervous energy. Her hands trembled as Poirot approached, his manner gentle but probing. Mademoiselle Elsie, you told us of voices you heard on the night Lady Beatrice vanished. Can you recall anything more? The tone, perhaps, or a word? Elsie's eyes darted to the floor, her cheeks flushing. I'm not sure, sir. It was late, and I was tired. I thought I heard a man's voice, low and angry, coming from the drawing room. But I didn't see anyone, I swear. Poirot's voice was soothing, like a lullaby. And this voice, it was familiar to you? Monsieur Vance, perhaps, or Monsieur Julien? She shook her head vehemently. No, sir. It wasn't Mr. Vance. I've heard him speak before, and this was different, deeper, rougher. And Mr. Julien was out, wasn't he? I heard him leave earlier. Poirot exchanged a glance with Jap. And the words, Mademoiselle, did you catch any? Elsie bit her lip, her brow furrowing. I thought I heard something about regret. The man said, You'll regret this. But it was so faint, sir. I might have imagined it. Imagined or not, Poirot said. It is a thread we must follow. Merci, Elsie. You have been most helpful. As they left the servants' hall, Hastings whispered, Regret, eh? Sounds like a threat. Could it be someone new? Someone we haven't considered? Perhaps, Poirot replied, his mind already racing. But the word regent and the threat of regret, they are connected, I am certain. We must explore every corner of this house, for I suspect the answer lies closer than we think. Back in the drawing room, Poirot paced slowly, his eyes scanning the walls, the furniture, the heavy drapes. He paused by a large oil painting of a pastoral scene, its frame ornate but slightly askew. With a delicate touch, he pressed along the frame's edge, listening for any telltale sound. Nothing. Yet his instinct, honed by years of unraveling human deceit, told him the room held more than it revealed. Jap, he said suddenly, have your men examined the walls for hollow spaces? A house of this age, it may have passages or compartments. Jap raised an eyebrow. Secret passages? You've been reading too many novels, Poirot. Perhaps, Poirot said, undeterred. But in a case where a woman vanishes from a locked house, we must consider all possibilities. As Jap summoned his constables to tap the walls, Poirot returned to the fireplace, his thoughts circling the charred fragment. The word regent was no mere coincidence. It was a signpost pointing to the heart of the mystery. Was it a reference to the street, a code, or something more sinister? And the scratch on the window, so carefully placed. Was it a distraction or a clue to the method of Beatrice's disappearance? The morning wore on, and the house seemed to close in around them, its silence heavy with secrets. Poirot knew the truth was near, hidden in the interplay of ash, voices, and scratches. He would find it, as he always did, through the meticulous exercise of his little gray cells. For now, he resolved to pursue the mysterious voice Elsie had heard, and to uncover the significance of regent, a word that held the key to Lady Beatrice's fate. Chapter 5. The Gambler's Debt. The afternoon light filtered weakly through the fog, casting a pall over the Ashford residence as Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Jap reconvened in the library. The air was heavy with the scent of old leather and wax polish, and the ticking of a grandfather clock marked the passage of time with relentless precision. Poirot stood by a tall bookcase, his small hands clasped behind his back, his green eyes sharp with purpose. The clues, the pearl earring, the charred scrap bearing the word Regent, the faint scratch on the window-sill, had begun to form a pattern in his mind, but one figure loomed larger now. Mr. Julian Ashford, Lady Beatrice's cousin, whose casual demeanor belied a life teetering on the edge of ruin. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Hastings, his voice low, "we have heard much of Monsieur Julian's charm, his nights at the club, his easy assurances. But charm, it can be a mask. I suspect our young gambler hides more than he reveals." Hastings nodded, his brow furrowed. He was awfully quick to dismiss Beatrice's disappearance as a lark, and living here, in her house, with her fortune at his fingertips, it's suspicious, Poirot. Japp, flipping through his notebook, added, "I've had a word with a contact at the Diogenes Club. Julian's alibi holds. He was there until midnight, playing cards, but he's in deep with some unsavory types. Owes thousands, they say." Poirot's mustache quivered. "Thousands, you say? A man in debt is a man under pressure, and pressure, it leads to desperate acts. We must search his rooms. There may be evidence of his entanglements." With Mrs. Crane's reluctant permission, the trio ascended to the second floor, where Julian's suite overlooked Regent Street. The rooms were a study in contrasts to the rest of the house, cluttered with racing forms, empty brandy bottles, and a scattering of unpaid bills on a mahogany desk. Poirot's keen eyes scanned the chaos, pausing on a locked drawer in the desk. With a nod to Japp, who produced a small tool, the drawer was opened, revealing a leather-bound ledger. "Voilà," Poirot murmured, flipping through the pages. The ledger detailed transactions, sums lent and repaid, but one name appeared repeatedly: R. Black. Payments to this mysterious figure totaled hundreds of pounds, dated over the past 6 months. "This R. Black," Poirot said. "He is no ordinary creditor. The sums are irregular, the dates sporadic. It suggests blackmail, or perhaps a partnership." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, frowned. "Blackmail? You think Julian was paying someone off? Or could this R. Black have something to do with Beatrice's disappearance?" "Perhaps both," Poirot replied. "We must confront Monsieur Julien. His debts, they are a motive, non?" They found Julian in the billiard room, idly knocking balls across the green baize, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His eyes narrowed at the sight of the ledger in Poirot's hand. "What's this, then? Snooping through my things? I've half a mind to—" "To what, monsieur?" Poirot interrupted, his tone sharp as a blade. "You live in your cousin's house, you spend her money, and yet you owe thousands to a man called R. Black. Who is he, and what hold does he have over you?" Julian's face paled, but he forced a laugh. "R. Black? Just a bookmaker I owe a bit to. Nothing sinister, Poirot. I'm good for it." "Good for it?" Japp scoffed. "You're in over your head, Ashford, and with Beatrice gone, you'd inherit a tidy sum, wouldn't you?" Julian stubbed out his cigarette, his hands trembling slightly. "Now, see here. I had nothing to do with her disappearance. Yes, I've borrowed from Beatrice. She's generous to a fault, but I'd never harm her. As for R. Black, he's just a name. I don't even know his face." Poirot's eyes gleamed with skepticism. "And yet you pay him regularly, in secret. Tell me, monsieur, Did Lady Beatrice know of your debts? Did she, perhaps, refuse to help you further?" Julian hesitated, his jaw tightening. She'd grown cautious lately, said she was being watched, that someone was after her money. I thought she was being dramatic, but she cut my allowance last week, said she needed to protect herself. "Protect herself," Poirot repeated softly. "From whom, I wonder? You, Monsieur Julien, or another?" Julian's gaze dropped to the floor, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine concern crossed his face. "I don't know, Poirot, but she was scared. I should have listened." As they left the billiard room, Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. Julian's debts and his connection to R. Black added a new layer to the mystery. Was Julian a victim of circumstance or a player in a darker scheme? And who was R. Black? A bookmaker, a blackmailer, or something more dangerous? Back in the library, Poirot paced, his cane tapping lightly. The ledger. It is a window into Julian's world, but it raises more questions. This R. Black. His name appears nowhere else in our inquiries, yet his influence is felt. We must trace him, Jap. A man who hides behind a name is a man with secrets. Jap nodded, jotting a note. I'll have my men dig into it. Bookmakers, loan sharks, someone's bound to know him. Hastings, leaning against a bookcase, ventured a theory. What if R. Black is tied to those anonymous letters? Beatrice was getting threats. Julian's in debt. Could Black be behind both? An excellent thought, Hastings, Poirot said, though his tone suggested he was already several steps ahead. But we must not leap to conclusions. The word Regent, the voices Elsie heard, the scratch on the window, these are pieces of a puzzle, and R. Black is but one. We must return to the drawing room tonight. I have a theory, mes amis, that requires testing. As the clock struck 5, Poirot's resolve hardened. Julian's debts and the mysterious R. Black had deepened the mystery, but they also brought him closer to the truth. The little gray cells were at work, weaving together the threads of ash, voices, and hidden motives. Somewhere in this house, or in the shadowy world beyond, lay the key to Lady Beatrice's fate, and Poirot would not rest until he found it. Chapter 6. The Midnight Revelation. The clock in the Ashford residence struck 11, its chimes resonating through the silent house like a call to judgment. Hercule Poirot stood in the drawing room, his small figure illuminated by the soft glow of a single gas lamp. The fog outside had thickened, pressing against the windows like a conspirator, muffling the sounds of Regent Street. Captain Hastings, bundled in his overcoat, shivered despite the fire crackling in the hearth, while Inspector Japp, ever pragmatic, checked his watch with a grimace. "Really, Poirot?" Japp said, his voice low to avoid alerting the household. "Dragging us back here at this hour? What's this about a reconstruction? We've searched the place top to bottom." Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the lamplight, his mustache quivering with suppressed excitement. "Patience, mon ami. The little gray cells, they have been at work. The clues, the earring, the ash, the scratch, the voices, they form a pattern. But it is incomplete. Tonight we shall reenact the moments of Lady Beatrice's disappearance. The house, it will speak to us." Hastings, leaning against the rosewood table, where Beatrice's untouched dinner still lay, looked skeptical. "Reenact? What, you mean play act her vanishing? I don't see how that'll help, Poirot. The window's locked, the doors were bolted. No one could have got in or out." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his voice soft but firm. "And that, Hastings, is why we must look beyond the obvious. The locked window, it is a deception, a stage trick to mislead us. Come, let us begin." He positioned himself by the fireplace, where the smudge of ash and the charred scrap bearing the word Regent had been found. Mademoiselle Elsie heard voices at 9 o'clock, oui? A man's voice, angry, saying, "You'll regret this." Let us assume Lady Beatrice was here, in this room, when the voices were heard. But how did her abductor enter and leave without trace? Poirot moved to the window, his fingers tracing the faint scratch on the sill. This mark, it suggests an attempt to make us believe the window was used, yet it was locked, and the scratch is too precise, too deliberate. Non, the exit was elsewhere. He turned, his gaze sweeping the room with the intensity of a hawk. The heavy drapes, the ornate furniture, the large oil painting, all seemed to mock him with their silence. Then his eyes fell on a massive bookcase, its shelves laden with leather-bound volumes, its base flush against the wall. A faint irregularity caught his attention, a slight gap where the wood met the floor, barely visible in the dim light. "Voilà," Poirot murmured, his voice barely audible. He approached the bookcase, his gloved hands probing its edges with the care of an archaeologist. He pressed a panel near the base, and with a soft click, a section of the bookcase swung inward, revealing a narrow passage, its walls damp and cobwebbed. "Good Lord," Hastings exclaimed, stepping forward. "A secret passage in a London townhouse?" Japp, equally stunned, peered into the darkness. "Blimey, Poirot, how'd you know it was there?" "The little gray cells, Inspector," Poirot said, his tone modest but triumphant. "The house, it is old, built in an era of intrigue. Such passages are not uncommon in homes of this stature. And this one, it explains much. How Lady Beatrice was taken without disturbing the locks. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for a single person, and it smelled of mildew and neglect. Poirot, undeterred by the dust, led the way with a small flashlight, its beam revealing stone steps descending to a lower level. The passage ended at a concealed door which opened into a small courtyard behind the house, hidden from the street by a high wall. "See here," Poirot said, pointing to fresh scuff marks in the dirt. "Someone passed through recently. The kidnapper, he used this passage to enter and leave, leaving the earring and the scratch as misdirection." Japp scratched his head. But who knew about this passage? The servants? Julian? Poirot's eyes narrowed. Someone intimate with the house, Inspector. Someone who knew its secrets. He turned, his gaze falling on the butler, Mr. Grayson, who had appeared silently at the drawing-room door, his face pale in the lamplight. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, his voice deceptively mild. "You have served the Ashfords for 30 years, non? You know every corner of this house, every hidden nook. Tell me, did you know of this passage?" Grayson's hands trembled, his usual composure cracking. I knew of it, sir. It was used in the old days, for deliveries or to avoid creditors. But I swear, I never thought." "Never thought?" Poirot interrupted, his tone sharp. "Yet you did not mention it when Lady Beatrice vanished. Why, monsieur? What do you hide?" Grayson's shoulders sagged, and he sank into a chair, his face ashen. "I meant no harm, sir. I was approached weeks ago by a man. He knew things about my past, mistakes I made long ago. He threatened to expose me unless I helped him." "And this man," Poirot pressed, "he is the one called R. Black?" Grayson nodded, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, he told me to leave the passage unlocked on the night Lady Beatrice disappeared. I didn't know what he planned, I swear. I thought it was just a meeting, not this. Japp stepped forward, his notebook out. Who is our Black, Grayson? Give us a name. I don't know his true name, Grayson said, desperation in his eyes. He contacted me by letter, always signed R. Black, but his voice, I heard it once, outside the house. It was the same as the one Elsie heard that night. Poirot's mind raced, the pieces falling into place. The passage, the voices, the mysterious R. Black. It was a web of deceit, and Grayson, though complicit, was a pawn. Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, you will tell us everything, every letter, every meeting, and you will help us find Lady Beatrice. As Japp took Grayson aside to take a full statement, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression grave. The net tightens, mon ami. R. Black is the key, and I suspect he is no stranger to this case. We must act quickly, for Lady Beatrice's life may depend on it. The midnight hour had passed, but for Poirot, the revelation of the passage was only the beginning. The truth, he knew, lay just beyond his grasp, hidden in the shadows of R. Black's identity and the motives that drove him. With the little gray cells at full tilt, Poirot prepared for the final act of this intricate drama. Chapter 7. The Unmasking. The gas lamps along the Thames cast a feeble glow through the fog, their light barely penetrating the damp night air, as Hercule Poirot, Captain Hastings, and Inspector Japp followed the trembling Mr. Grayson through the labyrinthine streets of London's Docklands. The butler's confession had ignited a spark in Poirot's mind, and now, with the urgency of a hound on the scent, he led the trio toward a derelict warehouse near Wapping, where Grayson claimed Lady Beatrice Ashford was being held. The secret passage in the Regent Street townhouse had been the key, and Grayson's reluctant admission had pointed them to this grim destination. Mon ami, Poirot said to Hastings, his voice low but steady. We approach the denouement, the little gray cells. They have pieced together the puzzle, the earring, the ash, the passage, the mysterious R. Black. All lead us here, to the truth. Hastings, gripping his walking stick as if it were a weapon, glanced nervously at the shadowed warehouses looming around them. I don't like this, Poirot. This place is a maze. If Vance is behind it, as Grayson says, he could have men waiting. Japp, his revolver tucked discreetly in his coat, grunted. If Vance is our man, he'll regret tangling with Scotland Yard. But you're sure about this R. Black business, Poirot? Grayson's word isn't exactly gospel. Poirot's mustache twitched with confidence. The little gray cells do not err, Inspector. Grayson's fear, it is genuine. And the name R. Black, it is a veil, but one we shall soon lift. Grayson, his face gaunt under the flickering lamplight, led them to a sagging warehouse, its windows boarded and its walls streaked with grime. He pointed to a side door, half hidden by crates. This is where he told me to send word if anyone asked questions, he whispered. I was to leave a note under a stone, but I swear I never saw her ladyship taken. Poirot's eyes narrowed. You have done enough, Monsieur Grayson. Now you will remain here with one of Japp's men. We proceed. Japp signaled to a constable who had joined them, and Grayson was led aside, his head bowed. Poirot, with a nod to Japp and Hastings, approached the door, his cane tapping softly. Japp eased it open, revealing a cavernous interior lit by a single lantern. The air was thick with the smell of tar and damp wood, and faint sounds, muffled voices, echoed from deeper within. They moved silently, Poirot's small figure surprisingly agile as he navigated the crates and barrels. At the far end of the warehouse, a partition of rough planks formed a makeshift room. Through a crack, Poirot glimpsed movement. A figure bound to a chair, her auburn hair unmistakable even in the dim light. Lady Beatrice Ashford. "Voila," Poirot whispered, his voice barely audible. "She lives, but we must be cautious. Her captor is near." Japp drew his revolver, and Hastings tightened his grip on his stick. They crept closer, the voices growing clearer. One was low, commanding, unmistakably male. "You'll sign the papers, Beatrice, or you'll never see daylight again." Poirot signaled for silence, his eyes scanning the shadows. A second figure emerged, a tall man, his back to them, his voice dripping with menace. It was Reginald Vance, his polished veneer replaced by a ruthless edge. In his hand gleamed a small pistol, pointed at Beatrice. Japp needed no further prompting. "Police!" he barked, stepping forward with his revolver raised. "Drop the weapon, Vance!" Vance spun, his face contorting with fury, but he hesitated as he saw Japp's gun and Poirot's unyielding gaze. "You're too late," he snarled, though his hand wavered. "She's worth millions, and I'll have my share." Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but piercing. "Monsieur Vance, or should I say R. Black, your game is finished. The passage, the letters, the threats. You thought to outwit Hercule Poirot, but you have failed." Vance's eyes widened, but before he could act, Japp's constable rushed in from the side, tackling him to the ground. The pistol clattered across the floor, and within moments, Vance was in handcuffs, his protests drowned by Japp's orders. Hastings hurried to untie Beatrice, who was pale but composed, her eyes blazing with defiance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite her ordeal. "I knew someone would come. Thank you." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle, it is my duty to restore order. But tell me, how did this man ensnare you?" Beatrice, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had chafed, explained. "He came to the house that night, through a passage I didn't even know existed. He threatened me, said he'd ruin my family's name if I didn't marry him or pay him. When I refused, he drugged me, chloroform, I think, and brought me here. He wanted me to sign over my estate." Poirot nodded, his suspicions confirmed. "And the letters, they were his doing, to frighten you into compliance. The word Regent, a taunt perhaps, or a careless mistake. And Grayson, he was your pawn, Monsieur Vance?" Vance, now subdued, sneered but said nothing. Japp, securing the cuffs, growled, "We'll get the full story out of him at the yard. Blackmail, kidnapping. Oh, you're in for it, Vance." As they escorted Beatrice and Vance from the warehouse, Poirot lingered a moment, his gaze sweeping the scene. The lantern, the ropes, the damp walls, all were pieces of the puzzle he had solved through method and observation. Yet one detail nagged at him: Grayson's role. The butler's fear had been real, but was there more he had not confessed? Back at the Ashford residence, Beatrice was reunited with a tearful Elsie and a subdued Mrs. Crane. Julian, summoned from his club, expressed relief but avoided Poirot's gaze, his earlier nonchalance replaced by unease. Poirot made a mental note to watch him. Debts and secrets, he knew, often lingered beyond the resolution of a case. As dawn broke over Regent Street, Poirot stood by the drawing-room window, the fog lifting at last. "The order, it is restored," he murmured to Hastings, who stood beside him. "But the human heart, mon ami, it remains a mystery even to Hercule Poirot." With Vance in custody and Beatrice safe, the case was nearing its close. Yet Poirot's little gray cells remained alert, for in the shadows of wealth and ambition, there were always more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 8. The Order Restored. The morning sun bathed Whitehaven mansions in a golden glow, banishing the last vestiges of London's fog. Hercule Poirot sat in his immaculate study, a steaming cup of tisane cradled in his hands, its herbal aroma mingling with the scent of polished wood and fresh ink. The room, with its orderly shelves and gleaming surfaces, was a sanctuary of precision, a reflection of Poirot's methodical mind. Across from him, Captain Hastings lounged in an armchair, his face alight with the satisfaction of a case resolved, though his brow still creased with lingering questions. "By Jove, Poirot," Hastings said, setting down his coffee. "You pulled it off again. Lady Beatrice safe, Vance behind bars. It's a tidy end, but I still can't believe Grayson's part in it. The old butler, a pawn in Vance's scheme. It's like something out of a penny dreadful." Poirot's green eyes twinkled as he sipped his tisane. "Mon cher Hastings, the human heart is capable of many contradictions. Grayson, he was loyal to the Ashfords, yet fear made him pliable. It is not the first time I have seen a man of duty bend under the weight of his past." The resolution of Lady Beatrice Ashford's disappearance had unfolded with the precision of a well-played symphony, each note struck by Poirot's unerring logic. The secret passage, the charred scrap bearing the word Regent, the pearl earring, the faint scratch on the windowsill, all had been threads in a tapestry of deception woven by Reginald Vance, alias R. Black. His plan, Poirot had deduced, was to coerce Beatrice into signing over her fortune, using blackmail and kidnapping to exploit her refusal of his marriage proposal. Grayson's reluctant complicity, driven by Vance's threats to expose a long-buried indiscretion, had provided the means. A hidden passage known only to the butler and a few long-dead Ashfords. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. The little gray cells, Hastings, they thrive on the small details. The earring, it was left to suggest a struggle, yet its placement by the window was too perfect. The scratch, a deliberate misdirection to imply an impossible exit. And the ash, with its single word, Regent, it was Vance's arrogance, a taunt he could not resist. Hastings nodded, though his expression remained puzzled. "But what about Julian? He's still in debt, isn't he? And those payments to R. Black, Vance, I mean, could he have been involved?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Monsieur Julian, he is a man of weaknesses, but not, I think, of malice. His debts made him a suspect, oui, but his concern for Beatrice, though belated, was genuine. The payments to R. Black were Vance's cleverness, exploiting Julian's financial ruin to create a shadow of guilt. No, Julian was a distraction, not a conspirator." A knock at the door interrupted them, and Inspector Japp entered, his face weary but triumphant. "Morning, Poirot. Hastings. Just came from the yard. Vance is singing like a canary now. Admitted to the letters, the blackmail, the lot. Says he planned to hold Beatrice until she signed over her estate, then let her go abroad to avoid suspicion. Nasty piece of work." "And Grayson?" Poirot asked, his tone measured. Jap sighed. He's cooperating, likely face charges for aiding, but the judge may go easy, given his remorse. Beatrice is back home, under guard for now. She's shaken but stubborn. Says she'll never let a man like Vance break her. Poirot nodded, satisfied. Mademoiselle Beatrice, she has the spirit of a lion. She will recover, and her fortune, it is safe. Jap hesitated, then added, "One thing bothers me, Poirot, that word regent. Why leave it in the ashes? Seems a daft risk for a man like Vance." "Arrogance, Inspector," Poirot replied. "Vance, he saw himself as untouchable, a master of the game. The word was his signature, a nod to the street where he would claim his prize. But he underestimated the power of method, of order. No detail escapes Hercule Poirot." Hastings grinned. "You're insufferable when you're right, you know that? But what now? Back to your tisane and quiet evenings?" Poirot's eyes sparkled with mischief. "For now, mon ami, I shall savor the calm. But London, she is never quiet for long. The shadows, they always hold another mystery, waiting for the little gray cells to illuminate them." As Jap and Hastings exchanged farewells and left for their respective duties, Poirot rose and stood by the window, gazing out at the bustling city. The fog had lifted, revealing the orderly chaos of Regent Street below. Lady Beatrice was safe, Vance was in custody, and the house on Regent Street held no more secrets, at least for now. Yet Poirot knew that human nature, with its greed, fear, and hidden passions, would soon weave another puzzle for him to solve. He sipped his tisane, the warmth of the cup grounding him in the moment. The order had been restored, the balance tipped back toward justice. But in the quiet of his study, Poirot's mind remained ever alert, ready for the next whisper of intrigue that London's streets would surely bring.